At the beginning of the 3rd chapter of Ruth, Naomi goes into matchmaker mode. Why shouldn't Boaz step up as a redeemer and marry Ruth? They both have hearts of gold. What a perfect match they would be. The Moabite sweetheart and the Bethlehem land tycoon.
One day Naomi said to Ruth, "My dear, isn't it time that I find a husband for you and get you happily married again? The man I'm thinking of is Boaz. He has been so kind to us and is a close relative. I happen to know that he will be winnowing barley tonight out on the threshing floor."
Winnowing is the process of separating the mixed pile of grain stalk and husk to get to the grain that can be eaten.
"Now do what I tell you. Bathe and put on some perfume and some nice-looking clothes, and go on down to the threshing floor. But don't let him see you until he has finished his supper."
Ruth probably looked pretty working there in the field, but at the same time, she would have been covered with dirt and sweat. If she was going to put a marriage proposal into action, she must look her best. Or as my Bible teacher in high school said, if the barn needs painting, paint it. "Notice where he lies down to sleep," Naomi said. "Then go and lift the cover off his feet and lie down there, and he will tell you what to do concerning marriage." It has been suggested that Boaz's covering represented the security Ruth would have if she became his wife. It was common for servants to lie at the feet of their masters. By applying this custom to the kinsman-redeemer law, Ruth could formally alert Boaz of his responsibility to find someone to marry her or marry her himself. And Ruth replied, "All right, I will do whatever you say." So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed her mother-in-law's instructions. After Boaz had finished a good meal, he lay down very contently beside a heap of grain and went to sleep. It was just an ordinary night, until it wasn't. Ruth came in quietly and lifted the cover off his feet and lay there. Suddenly, around midnight, he woke up and sat up startled. There was a woman lying at his feet. We can't blame Boaz for being startled. For all he knew, grain thieves had descended upon the threshing floor. "Who are you?" he demanded.
"It is I, sir, Ruth," she replied. "Make me your wife according to God's law, for you are my nearest relative."
"Thank God for a girl like you," he exclaimed. Boaz was a kind and optimistic man, even after being woken up from a sound sleep with a full stomach. He realizes that Ruth is willing to marry him for Naomi's sake, not her own.
"For you are being even kinder to Naomi now than before. Naturally, you'd prefer a younger man, even though poor. But you have put aside your personal desires."
We don't know how much older Boaz was, but it was old enough for him to mention it. But instead of being a problem, it just simply resulted in the greatest May-December romance found in the Bible.
"Now don't worry about a thing, my child," Boaz said. "I'll handle all the details, for everyone knows what a wonderful person you are. But there is one problem."
Ruth must have been thinking, what's the catch? What kind of red tape is he talking about?
"While it is true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am."
The name of the Redeemer in the book of Ruth is never mentioned, nor how he was related to Elimelech.
Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him. If he is willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then, surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until morning."
So Ruth laid at Boaz's feet until morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, "No one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor." Why did Boaz care if Ruth was seen at the threshing floor? Boaz didn't want anyone to get the wrong idea about Ruth spending the night with him, especially when there was another redeemer who may choose to marry her.
Then Boaz said to her, "Bring your cloak and spread it out." He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to town.
When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "What happened, my daughter?" Ruth told Naomi everything that Boaz had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said to her, "Just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he settles things today."
Why was Naomi so certain that Boaz would solve things fast? She knew he was a man of good character who would follow through on his promises. Also, I'm sure she was trying to calm Ruth's nerves. There must have been anxiety as she waited to find out who she was going to marry. Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the family redeemer he had mentioned came by. So Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you."
So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit in as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it, so you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it."
Then Boaz went on to the next stage of the purchase agreement, that Ruth would be a part of the package. Nowadays, if you buy land, a wife normally is not part of the deal. Then Boaz told him, "Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way, she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." We can only guess what was going on in Boaz's mind. This fellow was the only roadblock in getting Ruth himself. "Then I can't redeem it," the family redeemer replied, "because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it." Why would the redeemer back out of getting Ruth as a wife? If he married Ruth, it would add the financial burden of having another wife and whatever children he would have with her. The man must have had other children, and the inheritance would have been divided into too many pieces.
Now in those days it was the custom in Israel for everyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the family redeemer took off his sandal as he said to Boaz, "You buy the land." Then Boaz said to the elders and the crowd standing around, You are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. And with the land I have acquired Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon, to be my wife. That way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her late husband, and to inherit the family property here in his hometown. You are all witnesses today.
Most men who want to propose to a woman don't have to check in with another guy to see if he wants her. But it all came together in Boaz's favor. Then the elders and all the people standing at the gate replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nations of Israel descended. May you be famous in Bethlehem, and may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman, who will be like those of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar and Judah." Perez was an example of the Levirate practice, where a brother or relative of the late husband marries the widow. Because Ruth's husband had no living brothers, Boaz followed this practice. So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son.
Then the women of the town said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is a son of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons."
7 is a number indicating holiness in the Bible, and 7 sons was a way of describing the perfect family. Ruth was better. She had abandoned her country, gave up her gods, moved to a foreign land, and went out into a field among strangers to provide for her mother-in-law. The story of Ruth foreshadows the coming Messiah, who would come through their bloodline. Boaz is a type of Christ as the Redeemer of Ruth, and Jesus would be the Redeemer of all mankind. Naomi had thought that the Lord had turned his back on her, perhaps forever. And suddenly, this little fellow comes along. And Ruth, the childless widow, whose future held no promise, was now the mother of a son they would name Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had a son who became nothing less than the greatest king the world has ever known.